Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of our Questions and Answers show, where I take a look and answer a lot of your questions from the past week. And today is Sunday. What is today? February the 3rd. Already into February. Winter is here. We're halfway into it. Hopefully more than that, but we'll see. It's been pretty damn cold here in New York for the last week and a half. But just got to wait for spring, right? So let's get to your questions, right? So let's start off with Music Head in Stockholm 97. Hi, Pete. Thank you for answering my questions on Zool music. I have two questions for you this week. Have you listened to a Swedish band called Algarnas Tradgard? If you haven't, please check out their first album, Framtid Al blah 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 from 1972. It's kind of a kraut space rock album with lots of Swedish folk music in it. Very unique album and one of my top favorite albums of all time. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Yeah, I actually own that album. Man, I haven't listened to it in a long time. I do like it. Probably need to bring it out and revisit it because it's been a while since I've heard it. But yeah, I picked that up probably back in like the mid-90s or something like that. Had it for quite a while. Question number 2 from Music Head in Stockholm 97. Have you listened to a band called Ice Cross? They were a heavy rock metal band from Iceland who only released one album in 73. Very dark and heavy for its time. I think you would enjoy it quite a bit. Yeah, I actually had never heard of them before, but I went here on YouTube and I listened to the whole album just the other day, and it's good. Pretty heavy. Vocals are a little bizarre, and there's a lot of like anti-Christian themes going on there, which kind of like predate the whole black metal scene. But I like the guitar work, some really ripping blues rock guitar stuff in there. So pretty heavy stuff, definitely unique, and it's always good to be kind of introduced to something you never heard before, right? So thanks for that. From Vince Ostrowski. Hello, Pete. What do you think of the band Mott the Hoople? I like the early stuff on Atlantic Records the best. Also looking forward to their show in Chicago as Mott the Hoople 74. Always enjoy your videos. Keep them coming. Yeah, I think I've been asked this question before, but I like Mott the Hoople. I only have one release by them, though. I have the 1974 double live album, which I like quite a bit. I never really bothered to go into their studio stuff, but I like that. From Anthony Ferraro. Speaking of the Dead, Grateful Dead, do you have any Jerry Garcia solo albums in your collection? Cats Under the Stars and Run for the Roses are big favorites. You know, Anthony, I don't, and I've long thought of like jumping into some of Jerry's solo stuff because I've heard a lot of good things about it. I just haven't gone there yet. I probably should. So what I'm probably going to do is take your recommendations here, and I'm going to go listen to them, see what I think, and if I like them, I'll pick them up. So, but thanks for that. From Wizardo Fox. Hi, Pete. Thanks for answering my questions. Which are your favorite hard rock ballads from the 70s? Man, there's so many of them, right? I'll throw a couple out here. Again, some are hard rock, some are just good old rock, you know. But Lady by Styx, All by Myself by Eric Carmen from the Raspberries, Only Women Bleed by Alice Cooper, Silly Love Songs by Wings. Love that song. Without You by Badfinger. That's their interpretation of a Harry Nilsson song. Love of My Life by Queen. And how, you know, I guess technically More Than a Feeling is a ballad, right? It's pretty much that's a rock ballad, right? It's interesting because like hard rock ballads of the 80s are very different from hard rock ballads of the 70s. You know, totally different beast. But there's just a few right there. From All Media Reviews, blogspot.com. Do you know or like the Canadian band The Tea Party? I ask this partly because I find them to be a great band with an impressive discography. I also bring them up due to much recent mention of the band Greta Van Fleet and their similarity to Led Zeppelin. I find the Tea Party take the Zeppelin influence and create something of their own. Well, I think all the people who keep talking up Greta Van Fleet should instead be listening to and talking about the Tea Party instead. I mean, I've listened to them on and off over the years. Quite frankly, I don't think they sound anything like Zeppelin, other than maybe the guitar player and singer. His voice, to my ears, doesn't sound anything like Plant. Some of his guitar phrasings at times sound a little Zeppelinish, but I don't really get the comparison there. I don't think they sound anything like Greta Van Fleet, and I don't think they really sound at all like Zeppelin. A good band nonetheless, though. Good rock, bits of prog. There's some, folky stuff going on in there, and good band. Yeah, why they never really took off is, it's a good question. Although they believe they had like a long period of inactivity, but they put out an album a couple years ago, which is pretty good. From Kill Metal. Hey Pete, absolutely love your channel. Thank you, sir. I know you're a big Halloween fan, and I would love to see your worst to best album CD list and your top 10 songs from them too. Fairly new to your channel. I can't get enough. Having a blast going through the archives. Keep up the excellent work. Thank you. As far as Halloween, doing either best to worst album or a top 10 songs, yeah, I think I might want to do a top 10 songs. That'd be a pretty cool idea. Thanks for that. I will add them to my list. From CD, question. Are you related to Don Pardo of SNL announcer fame? Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? I can't tell you, guys, how many times over the years I have been asked this question. And for many years, I got asked it so many times that I just started saying, fuck it, I'm just going to play along with this. And I would tell people that he was my uncle. But no, I am not related to Don Pardo, to my knowledge. Yeah, but it's a common question. I think that's basically the only other Pardo anybody knows. So, of course, got to ask if he's related, right? From Earl Joy. Pete, I think your taste in music may be more eclectic than even mine. What is your opinion of the southern rock band, the Amazing Rhythm Aces? A good band. And, it's one of those bands that and I own and enjoy a lot of southern rock stuff. And I think, the Amazing Rhythm Aces kind of go a little bit more into the country rock side of things, kind of like, Poco, the Eagles, and Marshall Tucker. But man, that guy, Barry Burton, pretty good, tasty player, right? I like his stuff. I actually, based on your question, I think I probably need to go and buy some of their stuff because everything I've ever heard by them I've liked. I just never have purchased anything. But I think maybe I need to rectify that. From our friend Luis Roberto, 4 questions. Luis! Keep them to 2. What do you think when some bands decide to do a part 2 of a classic work? In my opinion, it's very dangerous. Until today, it did not work out well. Here's some examples. Alice Cooper, Welcome to My Nightmare. Jethro Tull, Thick as a Brick 2. Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime 2. And King Diamond, Abigail 2, The Revenge. I agree that has not always worked out well. And, I think let's just talk about the ones you mentioned here. Alice Cooper's Welcome to My Nightmare, actually pretty strong album. Is it as good as the original? Absolutely not. But I think it's good. Jethro Tull, Thick as a Brick, same thing. A pretty strong album. Is it the classic that the original Thick as a Brick is? Absolutely not. Operation Mindtime Crew, yeah, that's Mindcrime 2, not Crew. That is not very good. It's funny because when that first came out, I actually kind of liked it. And then over time, I'm just kind of like, yeah, this is not very good at all. So sometimes it's best to leave these classic concept works alone and not continue on with them years and years later. But, a lot of bands, what they do is they go through a period in their later careers where they're not really, the sales aren't there, the interest isn't there. So what they do is they go and revisit a classic that everybody loves up, and they do like a sequel decades later. And, what happens is band styles change, the vocals change, all that kind of stuff. So usually it winds up being a pale comparison to the original. As far as King Diamond's Abigail 2, I have not heard that, so I can't comment on that one. That's a great question. So Lewis's second question, have you ever been to a Satan show? I have not, but I love Satan. We're talking about the new wave of British heavy metal band from England, from Britain. I would like to. They play a lot, in recent years anyway, in the New York area, but they play in Brooklyn. They usually go to this little metal club in Brooklyn, and I just don't get to Brooklyn much at all. They haven't come close to me. But I would love to go see them. Great. Since they've gotten back together, man, their albums are awesome. Question number 3, Dave Lombardo or Nick Menza? Sorry, Lombardo. Lombardo's amazing from Slayer. And then a movie question, Godfellas or Casino? Joe Pesci is incredible. Yeah, Joe, in Joe's heyday was great. I'm going to have to lean towards Goodfellas a little bit, but I love Casino. Casino's not far behind. Casino's a very underrated Scorsese film, and I think De Niro and Pesci, as well as Don Rickles, and as well as Sharon Stone. Come on, the acting in that movie is just awesome stuff. But Goodfellas has to get the slight edge there. And then another part of the question, and again, he's not really asking a question here, but Detail, the genius and master John Sykes is back to music. Yeah, he's got a new album set to be released, which he's been talking about for eons. I'm not holding my breath that it's going to come out this year, but apparently it's imminent. He was at NAMM last week talking about doing a trio tour here in the States at some point this year. He's got the album ready to go, which has had multiple names to it and all this kind of stuff. With Sykes, he's just been inactive for so long. I love him, but I'll believe it when I see it. So I'm not going to get my hopes up until that CD actually comes out and he actually announces tour dates and, at least starts the damn tour. So, but I'm waiting just like everybody else. From Steve Syme, what does the term progressive rock mean to you? Is it primarily a style? Is it rock music that's influenced by classical music? Or is it rock music that expands the artistic palette of the genre? How about all the above? I mean, back in the day, progressive rock was a music form that combined elements of rock and classical and jazz and basically just was pushing the boundaries of what you would do in a conventional rock structure. So progressive rock in its early stages, right? The 2 and 3 minute songs out the window. We're going to do 5 and 6 and 8 and 12 and 20 minute songs with multiple time changes and long solos and, all multi-part vocal harmonies, all this kind of stuff, and sing about, dragons and fantasy and all the strange lyrical content, no love songs. I mean, that's what progressive rock was. What is progressive rock today? Progressive rock today, for the most part, is just basically mimicking what it was back in the late 60s throughout the 70s. It's kind of what it is. So most bands that we consider prog today are doing some form of what these bands were breaking through with back in the old days. So is it really progressing much more now? Not really, but for all of us, we don't really care. That's why, I think most people would agree when a newish band comes out now and they're playing a style like a classic symphonic prog style that maybe has hints of Genesis, Yes, King Crimson, all the usual suspects. We're like, oh my God, how great is that? It's not really progressing the genre any, but it doesn't really matter because that it has all those characteristics that we love. So, not really a definitive statement there, but I think everything you said, Steve, basically, I mean, that's what it is, right? From Scott Bacon, hey Pete, are you familiar with Morphine? They were a pretty popular club band in Boston in the 90s, and I think got some national exposure. Fronted by Mark Sandman, who also fronted Treat Her Right with just drums, sax, and 2-string bass. They had a very powerful sound. Cure for Pain is a good intro album if you would give them a shot, and Buena is a killer song. I remember hearing about Morphine all the time back in the 90s. I never listened to them at all. I can't even recall if I ever heard anything by them, so I went and did a little listening. That tune, Buena, is pretty good. I listened to a bunch of tunes from a couple other albums. Unique sound, not really my cup of tea, though. So, but thanks for suggesting them. From Gear Lad and Lad, have you ever heard of the band Cooney? If so, what did you think of them? That Looking for Action album from 1988 is damn good melodic hard rock. Another one of those bands that kind of came out and, didn't really last for too long, but created some quality stuff there in the mid-late 80s. So I would urge anybody who likes, really good, catchy AOR/hard rock with, a lot of metallic influences, not Metallica, metallic metal influences, check out Looking for Action from 88. It's a pretty damn good album. From NP, hey Pete, here's my question for this week. Thanks and always for reading. Which do you prefer, Caius or Queens of the Stone Age? And are you a fan of any of the other side project spin-off bands like Desert Sessions, Slow Burn, Unita, Mondo Generator, Brant Bjork, so on and so forth? And what do you think of them? Honestly, I have never listened to much Caius or Queens of the Stone Age, and I haven't heard any of those spin-off bands. There's just so much kind of like stoner stuff out there that you can't even keep up with it all. I will say, in my limited exposure to both of the original bands there, I like the Caius stuff a little better. It's just, to me, closer to like, Doom and that original stoner sound. I think Queens of the Stone Age, they are a little bit more commercial, and a lot of good material there too. But I think if I were to choose between the two, I would pick Caius. Okay, so, and I have not listened to any of the other bands. From Tate Davis, hello Pete, thanks so much for answering my questions. My question this week is about REM. I really enjoy them. Michael Stipe's vocals can give me a headache if I listen to their music for too long. Curious to know your thoughts. Thanks. No thanks. I am not an REM fan. I find their music and songs, while catchy, and I can understand why they're popular, not for me, and they're just a complete turnoff when I hear, if I'm ever listening to the radio, which is not often, and REM comes on, I change the channel. Just they don't do it for me. Never have. From Brandon Clark, you said before about growing up on Kiss, and I know you've had thoughts about recent Kiss performances, but will you go see their farewell tour? If so, is there anything you look forward to during the concert? I am not going to go. I'll tell you why. They want a lot of money for tickets, and I'm already committed going to the Stones this year. I'm going to see Elton John soon. I just got Billy Joel tickets. Going to see Dream Theater. I got King Crimson tickets. Going to see Michael Schenker. It's too much. I'm going to see Judas Priest and Uriah Heep. So, do I want to spend like $150, $200, $300 on Kiss tickets? Not really. Here's my opinion on it. I think they're going to try and make as much money on this tour as possible. Obviously, that's Kiss. But I saw them, I'm going to say it's 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, something like that, with Def Leppard. And it was really good. And it was the first time I had seen them in a long time. And I have really good memories of that show. That's what I want to keep. I've seen and heard too many recordings and YouTube videos of how horrible Paul Stanley has been sounding over the last year. And even though there's always a chance that like Peter or Ace may show up, although now with this big feud once again between Ace and Gene and Paul, I kind of doubt it, but there's always a possibility that those guys might show up at any given show. But you know what? I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to go. And I think I have enough good memories of seeing Kiss that I'm going to leave it at that. Maybe they'll put out a DVD or Blu-ray at some point of a notable show on this tour, and I'll check that out. But as far as going, I'm not going to do it. From the Dallas Space Cowboy, hey Pete, love your channel. Thanks for all the great content. You are welcome. I have 2 questions. You've mentioned before you play guitar, and I'd like to learn guitar myself. How would you recommend someone go about learning? Well, things are a lot different now than when I first started playing. So when I first started playing, I went and took lessons for a while. Probably should have taken them for longer. But, I was in high school, I had other things going on, then I went to college, and it just wasn't going to happen. So I took lessons for a few months and then kind of dropped off with that. And I should have kept up with it. But nowadays, so that's what I recommend you doing. Go and find a good teacher, take some lessons. That's your best bet because you'll learn all the fundamentals and things like that. And then from there, you got a wealth of places you can go to learn things. The internet, YouTube. I admit, how many times I go onto YouTube now, I want to learn like a song or a lick or a riff or something or passage to any song. You can go find it on YouTube. There's either transcriptions or there's a guy on YouTube who's showing you step by step how to play stuff. There's so many ways to learn, but you're not going to learn a lot of, I guess you could, but get a good book. There's a lot of really good books on the market that show you how to, understand chord progressions and scales and all that kind of stuff and chords and, do whatever works for you. But I say a good teacher to start you is a great way to go. So that's what I would recommend. Second question from the Dallas Space Cowboy. What are your thoughts on the Ray Gillen demos for the Eternal Idol by Black Sabbath, if you've heard them? I have. They're included on the deluxe edition. In my opinion, his version of the album is just as good, if not better, than Tony Martin's. It depends on who, obviously those demos are not quite as refined as what finally became the Eternal Idol album. And as much as I love Tony Martin, Ray Gillen was a special talent. And so I've heard it. I like it. It almost makes it a different album, because their vocal styles are pretty different. But I urge anybody who likes that album, has never heard the Ray Gillen demos, to go search them out. They're available here on YouTube. You can go check them out. Good stuff. Just imagine what would have been if Ray hadn't quickly, left the band and stuck around for all those albums. Interesting. From Scott Kilpatrick. Hi, Pete. Love your shows on YouTube. Thank you, Scott. You are an amazing wealth of knowledge, and even though I am not much of a fan of the music styles you cover and discuss, well, we all can't be, I still find your talks very entertaining. 2 questions for your Q&A segment. Have you ever heard Syd Barrett's solo records, and if so, your opinions? I loved them in high school. I have not heard any of Syd's solo stuff. I've heard they're pretty bizarre, and they're probably worth seeking out, because I like that old Floyd stuff, so I'm going to do that. Thanks for that. And number 2, my favorite rock band in the 90s was Mr. Bungle. Have you heard of them? And if so, what's your opinion? Thanks. You know what? I only ever heard the first Mr. Bungle album. It's an acquired taste. Interesting stuff, though. I know a lot of people who are really into Mr. Bungle. I always liked Mike Patton as a vocalist. But he really, there's a guy who really stretched the boundaries of what you can do with, traditional vocals, right? I think he even got into a little bit of that in Faith No More, but it was in Mr. Bungle that he really was like let loose to the world. So again, not a band that is necessarily my cup of tea, but I understand how people are attracted to that stuff, and I think he's an interesting character anyway, and a very unique band. You got to give him props for that. From Stuart Fegley. Hi, Pete. Enjoy the Q&A shows. Always learn something new. On to my question for the week. What are your thoughts on the UFO offshoot bands Mogwai and Wasted? As part of that, I'd be curious how you rank the Wasted releases worst to best. Thanks. As far as Wasted goes, I've only ever listened to that first album, the Vices album, which I think is dynamite. I never bothered to dive into a lot of the other albums because they were very sporadically released, and at least here in the U.S., almost never available here unless you wanted to spend a shitload of money on an import. And I, quite frankly, haven't heard a lot of great things about a lot of those other Wasted albums. So I never bothered to really go there, although I did see them live a couple times back in the 80s, and they were always great live. You know, I love Pete Way, and I saw them once with Paul Raymond on guitar, and the other time was with that other guy. What was his name? I'm forgetting his name. The other guitar player who was damn good. He was on the first album. And as far as like Mogwai, that's good stuff, right? Basically, they're UFO albums, right? I mean, the Chocolate Box album is fantastic. You know, that came at a time where UFO was kind of like in limbo, and they just went and did that. And they should have just made those UFO albums, I think, and they probably would have sold better. But a lot of people who really follow UFO and all the various offshoots and members obviously know how good those Mogwai albums are. They're good. They're very, very solid. From Alex L. From my personal experience, I can say that when I'm in a bad mood or if my mind is distressed by something else, no matter how hard I try, I cannot listen to a particular CD properly. How does your mood affect you when listening or reviewing an album? For example, if you are in a bad mood one day, is there a chance that a new album you are listening to is also bad? Since you do not have the luxury to listen to a new album multiple times, often when reviewing, what is the chance that you will give it a bad review? After 3 months, for example, you pick up that album again and you change your mind, but the review is already written for SOT webpage. What do you do then? Also, since you know many musicians, is it easier or harder to review albums if you personally know somebody? That's a really cool question. So go back to the early part of it. You know, if I'm in a real shitty mood, chances are I'm not going to listen to something that I'm going to review. If I'm, you know, when you put your work hat on and you're like, all right, I need to listen to this because I need to form an opinion of it and write a review of it. If my mood is so bad, that's not a time for me to be doing that. And you have to learn when to walk away from it. And, you know, you just have to, because otherwise you're absolutely right. That's going to cloud you. You're not going to be in the mood to listen to it. You're not going to be in the mood to write the damn review. So obviously it's going to sour what you're going to put down. So generally speaking, if I am in a mood, and I'll be honest, I don't get in really shitty moods too often. I'm a pretty upbeat guy. But if I am in a mood and I'm not going to go listen to something or even sit down to write something that I have to cover, you know, from a professional standpoint, I might, to help cheer me up, go pull out something from my collection that means a lot to me to help bring me out of that mood. That's what I do. Okay. It just doesn't pay to, you know, force yourself to listen and write something about something when your mind is on other things or your mind is nowhere, right? Because you got to be able to focus and you have to open up your mind to be able to grasp the music that you're presented with that you in turn are trying to give an opinion on. So that's just me. As far as your second part of your question, since you know many musicians, is it easier or harder to review albums if you personally know somebody? It's hard, right? Because when you form a relationship with someone who is a musician or, you know, part of a band, or even if you know the whole band, they are counting on you to be objective, but also like, oh, he's my buddy, right? I'm hoping he gives me a good review on this. And your first instinct is to not let your friends down by saying, oh my God, this album is awful. So you have to kind of take yourself out of your body and say, okay, I'm reviewing this as a professional writer and not such and such's friend. But there is a tendency to, you know, I'm trying to think of the word. There is a tendency to put something in a better light perhaps than it actually might be because you know someone so well. I try very hard not to do that, but it does happen from time to time. So, yeah, that's a great question. Really good question. And I'm not sure if I really answered it or not, but great question. Next one from Mike Banfield. Great YouTubes, great website, great info. Thank you. We all seem to share much of the same taste. Do you remember the excitement you got when you started buying music? You take your latest purchase home, pour over the lyrics and other content, and really look forward to that first listen. I find that I don't get that same excitement these days, although I've been a serious collector since the mid-'70s and continue to be so, both CD and vinyl. Somehow now that music is more accessible than ever before, the anticipation is not there as it used to be. There is still an awesome amount of fantastic music being released. The fact that you can listen to, download most of it before official release dates, maybe detracts from that excitement. Your thoughts? Okay, that's a great question. I still get really excited and jazzed up for new releases from bands that I really love and have liked for a long time. The last part of your question really rings home. It's like, there's so much, with the social media and the internet now, it's like, you can hear parts of the album or the whole album way before it's released, and there's trailers to this, snippets of that, blah, 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 blah. It's the same thing with movies, right? They release all these movies. They release especially like the superhero movies. You get like 5 trailers before the damn thing comes out, and you feel like you've seen half the movie already. So I have tried very hard in recent years, and specifically with album releases. When a new album is coming out by a band that I really like, sometimes they'll release a 1 track ahead of time, maybe 2, maybe 3. Lately, I've just been avoiding. I may listen to 1, but I don't listen to any more of that. And I think, again, it just kind of dilutes the anticipation of actually getting in and diving into it for the first time. Like, perfect example, like Dream Theaters. I'm a big Dream Theater fan. Their new album's coming out in a couple weeks. And they released 1 song. I listened to that. I liked it. They released another one, and I said, you know what? I'm staying away from it. That's it. I'm going to wait till it comes out. I did the same thing with the Evergrey album that just came out. I waited till I actually had a full copy of that to dive into it. There's just some things, the Rival Sons just came out. I listened to the 1 song. I really liked it a lot. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to wait till it comes out. So, it's not the same as it used to be. Because when, we were all kids, you heard about a new album coming out probably when it came out, right? You'd be in a department store, you go to walk by the music section, there would be that LP or something, or you'd actually go to a record store and you'd be pouring through. It's like, oh my God, look, a new album. So unless you were like reading the newspapers or listening to the radio where they would announce new releases, or getting the Cream magazine, Hit Parade, or Rolling Stone, whatever the hell you were reading back in the day, you really wouldn't know when things came out, right? It was not like today where you have all this information at your fingertips at all times. So it's really different. So back then it was just like, oh my God, this is out. You bring it home and you're all excited about it. Now it's just like, months ahead of time what the release date is. Weeks before, you've already heard 3, 4 songs, and you've got the albums leak. You find them on YouTube. There's reviews up already. So there's no, all the guesswork has been taken out of it. You know everything about that album before you even got your hands on it, right? We try to review, like on the website, we try to review new releases as close to release date as possible, okay? But there are times where you see, an album's release date is, February 15th, and someone's got a review of it on a website already, like in the end of December. It's just like, So that's a great question. Yeah, it's the way it is nowadays. From Jamie Laszlo, for the first time ever, my favorite album of the year last year was a death metal album. Nothing wrong with that. The album is called Idol, and it's by the band Horrendous. I'm wondering if you know of this band. Somehow, even though they play death metal, they're able to make their music feel light and airy by letting the notes breathe. Plus, it has some of the best bass playing I've heard in the last decade. I actually went back to their discography and found their 2015 album, Anarita, to be even better. Yeah, the Idol album is actually very good. What I like about that band is that it's death metal, yes, but it's not this like relentless death metal style. It's very melodic. They do a lot of really cool kind of, some of the like solo sections where the guitars come in remind me a little bit of like classic Atheist. Atheist was really good at like injecting like these really atmospheric like jazz fusion guitar solos in the midst of these kind of real thrashy death metal tracks, and even some of the more progressive stuff of Death also. So Jamie, if you like that Horrendous album, or those albums I should say, go check out some of the classic Atheist and Death albums if you haven't already. I'm assuming you have, but really, really good stuff. From Lonnie VR, this week's question. Being a Memphis guy, I've always had a soft spot for Memphis bands that made it, or at least got some attention. The 2 I'm thinking about contain the late Jimmy Jamison as lead vocalist for Target, who put out 2 albums on A&M in the 70s and then the 80s, the group Cobra. They only released 1 album, and I'm not even sure if it was ever on CD. Just wanted your opinion on them if you're aware of them. Both very solid bands. Nice to hear Jimmy singing Heavier Fare. check them out. That's me saying that. Very good bands. If you like, again, Jamie Jamison kind of claim to fame was that he sang for Survivor for a bit, but he also had these two bands who were both, again, really good, like 80s or late 70s, early 80s, like melodic hard rock. Really, really solid stuff. So you can actually, all those albums are available on YouTube for you to go and check out. So I definitely check out the band Target and the band Cobra. Easy, just search for Jimmy Jamison, Target, Jimmy Jamison, Cobra. You'll find them. Both really good. And again, just really cool to hear Jimmy singing Heavier Fare. Lonnie's second question, Steve Vai or Joe Satriani? I personally dig them both. Yeah, I mean, I dig them both too, but if I have to pick between the two of them, I prefer Steve Vai. Steve Vai is just... Is there a more incredible guitar player out there who can just basically do it all, regardless of whether you like the music he makes or not? Let's face it, Vai is not, never has much been making commercially viable music. He does the music he wants to do, and it's off the wall, whatever. Man, that guy is like the sickest player still to this day. There's a lot of great guitar players out there, but I just always liked Vai. And I think Satriani is a great player too. Personally, Surfing with the Alien, Flying in a Blue Dream, and a couple other albums there are really fantastic. My problem with Satriani is a lot of his albums are just very samey. And I've enjoyed some of his more recent stuff over the last 15, 20 years, but man, nothing to me that he's released kind of really screams like must-hear stuff like those early solo albums of his, which are, really unique, very lyrical, great melodies, and he's a great player. I don't dislike him at all. There's something dangerous and exciting about Vai that I always really liked. So I prefer Vai. Just me, though. From Barry Strong. A few of us older folks live in Surrey, the birthplace of Beck, Clapton, and Page. We were in our local pub recently. We were discussing who we thought was the most gifted and the most influential guitarist. We could not agree, but for the record, I suggested that Jeff Beck is technically the most gifted, but Page the most influential due to his work with Zeppelin. We would appreciate your thoughts, please. Yeah, Page, all three of them were really influential, big time, in different ways, though. I absolutely think that Beck is probably the most technically gifted of all of three of them. However, I think Page is the better rounded player. Page could basically do it all. He can do the folk thing. He can play, obviously, hard rock. He can play blues. All sorts of stuff. Clapton, great blues player. Clapton's kind of as great as he is, kind of like a one-trick pony, though. I think Beck can also do a lot of great stuff. But, Page obviously can do all that great acoustic work and 12-string. And God, how much, if ever, have we heard Beck playing acoustic stuff, right? But Beck, man, masters hard rock and blues and jazz. So, yeah, most influential, I think, is probably Page. Technically the best guy is definitely Beck. Beck, in my opinion, is on a Hendrix Blackmore level. But unfortunately, the stuff that Beck has been involved with, as far as involved with over the years, not as commercially successful as either Page or Clapton, obviously. So I think Page is obviously, and Clapton are the household names, but Beck is obviously the most talented of those guys, I think. From Ryan B., what are your thoughts on the Dave Evans era of AC/DC? Probably best forgotten. There's not a lot out there you can listen to from that era. It's not very good. That's basically AC/DC in their infancy. A lot of glammy and boogie type of stuff. A curiosity if you're an AC/DC fan, sure. But I think they made the right choice of letting him go and bringing in Bon Scott, right? Also, question 2 from Ryan. Can you rank your favorite to least favorite of AC/DC? Have to say that for another show. Possibly I'll do a best and worst albums or a top 10 songs from AC/DC. Might do that. And third question, what are your thoughts on the Divinyls? Kind of a fun band. I remember when they kind of hit it big. They had here, and I'm assuming, Ryan, are you from Australia? You might be. That song I Touch Myself is a fun tune. And I remember when that was a big hit here in the U.S. To my knowledge, I don't remember they were ever having any other real big hit songs. A couple other minor ones, but that album that came from, I remember hearing that a lot back in the day. Pretty fun. And I always thought Chrissy Amphlett was a pretty sexy woman. It's sad that we've lost her. in recent years. But kind of a cool band. You know, had a short little run. Probably could have been bigger, right? From Mike F. Hey, Pete, thank you for answering my Grand Funk Railroad question from last week. Some more about Grand Funk. I know the issues between Don and Mel. Do you feel that the rift is too deep to overcome so that they could get back together with Mel and Craig Frost? And do you feel that they should get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And if they do, would Craig Frost get in as well? And can you tell me where I can get What's Funk and Grand Funk Lives without paying an arm and a leg for them? Thank you for your time. Well, first of all, I think you meant Mark Farner, not Mel, but the issue is between those guys and Mark. Mel and Don are still in the band, so they get along just fine. Will they ever get back together with Mark? I don't know. He would love it. I've read lots of interviews with him. As far as Craig, what is Craig Frost doing nowadays? I know he was playing with Bob Seger for a long time. I'm not sure what he's doing now. But will they ever? I don't know. Should they get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Absolutely. Will they? I hope so. They deserve it. I mean, they were a huge band for a long time. Really influential. A lot of hit singles. Sold tons of concert tickets. Man. So we'll see about that. But, yeah, as far as, those guys really screwed over Mark Farner. Big time. And he, to his credit, is willing to let bygones be bygones and let's get back together again, but it's just not happening. So I think it's Don and Mel that are kind of holding out there. And I think from what I've heard, Don Brewer is kind of the culprit of all this. Is great a drummer and pretty good singer. From what I've heard, he's the guy who really screwed Mark over. So we'll see. Oh, and as far as the other part of the question, where can you get Grand Funk? Grand Funk lives or lives, however you want to say it. You can get that on Discogs. Go to discogs.com, discogs.com. Type that in. You should be able to get that CD for less than $15. However, the What's Funk album is long out of print. Good luck getting that. I'm glad I bought mine 20 years ago because I see copies of that going for like $200, $300, $400, $500 now. Out of print. From Miss Astor Dancer. Hi, Pete. Enjoyed this video a lot as usual. I have a couple questions for you this time. Are you into the Beatles, and if so, to what extent? I like the Beatles. I own all the Beatles albums on CD. I will tell you, growing up, my father was a pretty big Beatles fan. I wasn't, mainly because I really preferred, and I still do, Paul McCartney and Wings material. I was really latched on to Paul McCartney and Wings. I always liked him the best out of the Beatles, and I liked his stuff the best in the Beatles. And then when I got introduced to the Wings material, I just really, really gravitated towards that. So I was always a bigger Wings fan than the Beatles, but I got to tell you, I really, as I've gotten older, I've really grown to appreciate the Beatles, and Revolver, and Sgt. Pepper obviously is good, and God, so many great albums. So many great albums. I think I don't like as much the early Beatles stuff, kind of like the teeny bopper bubblegum stuff, but like from the Revolver era and on, prime stuff. I really dig it. All right, Miss Astor's got more questions here. Well, admittedly, I have not watched every video you've ever done. The only reference I have ever seen by them in a brief mention of Sgt. Pepper in the concept album video. So there you have it. That's what I like. I like, when it comes to like the British invasion bands from the 60s, like the Beatles and the Stones and the Who and the Kinks and the Yardbirds, so on and so forth. The Who and the Stones are my favorite out of all of them. But like I said, as I've gotten older, I've grown to really appreciate the Beatles, specifically the latter period stuff. The early stuff is good for what it is. It's good like sugar pop stuff, but And then also she asked, would like to ask the same question about the Moody Blues. Yeah, I like the Moody Blues. I have most of their stuff too, up until a point. I think it's after the early 80s. It's not really worth getting anything that came after, but those late 60s and 70s albums are fantastic. I really dig them a lot. From J.K. Baca 41, great show as always. A couple of comments and then a couple of questions. For the person getting into birth control, they might like Epitaph or Grobschnitt. Yeah, especially Epitaph. As well as depending if they like the hard rock or prog birth control. You are correct. Power and the Passion is a great bridge between those two Eloy albums. Yep, exactly. I don't recall if you were into Barclay James Harvest at all. Yes or no? Yes, I like Barclay James Harvest. I have most of their early stuff. I love their 70s stuff. Again, to me, Barclay James Harvest, very similar to the Moody Blues. Maybe a little more guitar heavy. I dig that stuff. And then his last question, What do you think about Neil Sean's Journey Through Time tour with Greg Raleigh in tow? I think I was asked this a couple weeks ago. I think it's cool that he's doing it. I honestly don't know a hell of a lot about it other than the fact he's going to go out with Raleigh and what's his face on drums. Name is a mistake. Totally escaping me here. Was in Journey for many years. And a couple other guys, and they're going to play like some really early stuff, and then some of the Steve Perry era things that Raleigh sang. I think it's cool. I think it'll be good to see. I don't know if they're playing anywhere around here by me. But if you got tickets, good, go. I'm sure it'll be great. Neil Sean is great. From John Velatos, Pete, constantly discovering new music through your channel. Thank you. You're welcome. That's the point of this. First ever question. Sorry for the long post. I got carried away. Oh, my God. After you mentioned Warhorse last week, I had to listen on YouTube to the first album, great album. This led to the band Farm and to the Black Swan YouTube channel where, quoting someone else, there are many poorly known great bands and albums. I urge you and everyone else to take a look. The 70s was an incredible time for poorly known great bands. Question. Please share with us some of your favorite poorly known great bands and albums that we should listen to from that period. Well, I'm not going to say it here because all you need to do is go over to our, I believe that's in the History of playlist, and there is numerous videos talking about underground hard rock, metal, and prog bands of the 70s and talking about specific albums. That's all you need to do. He lists a bunch here like Mason and Granicus and Leafhound and Dogfeet, Orangutan, Farm, Copperfield, what else? Frigid Pink, Three Man Army, Dust, Bullet, Granny. I believe not all of them, but a good chunk of those I mentioned in those various shows. So I highly recommend everybody go check those out. I'm actually going to do another one on underground prog and hard rock soon from the 70s because I've just been amassing all sorts of good stuff. But anyway, go into the comments and feedback on last week's video because he lists a bunch of links to a lot of the different like a song from each of those bands. So pretty cool stuff. From Matty Boy Walker. Pete, what was your opinion on the newer Saxon material the last 15 years? I personally think albums like Lionheart, The Inner Sanctum, and Into the Labyrinth, Sacrifice, Bettering, wait, blah, 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 are better. Jesus, I'm trying to read this. All this stuff is, Matty Boy, your words are all jumbled here. Anyway, the older material from Wheels of Steel, Strong on the Law, and Denim and Leather, etc. Also now some much heavier live. What is your opinion of Saxon? All right, basically what he's trying to ask me is, do I like the new Saxon albums? You guys got to edit your posts here. My God, they make no sense. I think the most recent, the Saxon stuff is great, man. They're in one of those new wave of British heavy metal bands who have just been still kicking ass and releasing great albums over the last decade and a half. I mean, shit. Thunderbolt is awesome. Battering Ram, Sacrifice, Call to Arms, Lionheart, Inner Sanctum, Into the Labyrinth. You basically can't go wrong with any Saxon albums. The last, 6, 7, 8 albums are great. And if you love their early stuff, like, Denim and Leather, like you mentioned, Strong Arm of the Law and what have you, and Crusader, and if you haven't listened to any Saxon albums in the last, decade, you need to. It's great stuff, and they still kick ass live. He also asked me, have you ever seen them live? Yeah, I've seen them 3 times over the years. I saw them early. I believe it was their first ever U.S. tour. They opened up for Triumph. I believe it was late 81 at the Palladium, and they were awesome. In fact, I had never heard them before, and they came close to being better than Triumph. That's how good they were that night. I was like, holy crap, and I love Triumph. I've also seen them. I saw them last year, open for Judas Priest. They were great. And then I saw them maybe 4 years ago at BB King's in New York City, and they were awesome. So they still put on a great show. From Daniel Boss, any thoughts on the band Big Country? They get a bum rap because of the song Big Country, which was overplayed on MTV, but all their albums are really good. Best in my opinion is the Buffalo Skinners U.S. version with the big production. They had a great drummer in Mark Brzezicki, who also played with Fish and Pete Townsend. The late Stuart Adamson was a great songwriter and a very underrated talent. Sad loss. A very good friend of mine is a huge Big Country fan, and I tried to get into Big Country over the years. He's, really pushed them on me, and I've listened to a lot of their albums. I don't dislike them. They just never really click with me. Very talented guys, though. And again, maybe it's another band that I just need to go and revisit again. I've tried. In fact, I think I have CDRs that he made for me that, because, sometimes we do that. We make CDRs for each other. And if we like what we hear, we go out and buy the CD or whatever. So I probably should revisit those. From Arnaud B. Hi, Pete. Aside for English, what language do you prefer or like for the singing? Aside from me, what do you prefer like for the singing? Okay, so I think what you're trying to say is what if a band's going to sing in their, other than English, if a band's going to sing in their foreign tongue, which would I prefer? I got to say, I probably, out of non-English bands who sing in their own native tongue, I probably appreciate the Italians the best. Not just because I'm half Italian, but I just think that Italian vocals just sound really gorgeous, regardless of the band that's singing them. So, like all those old PFM and Bonco and numerous other Italian prog bands from the 70s and what have you. I don't mind listening to Italian at all. Something about it's just gorgeous. From Sanjit Ray, I really enjoy watching the concert movie Good Evening New York City by Paul McCartney. Recently watched it for the umpteenth time a few days back. Did you go to this concert? If so, please share some memories from that evening. No, I did not go to that concert and I haven't seen it. So I can't comment. Sorry. I'm sure it's fantastic. I love Paul McCartney. From Tom Ostrander. Hi, Pete. Back in the 70s, I bought an album because of the album cover called Mind Explosion by a band Lucifer's Friend. But at the time, I just started to listen to Judas Priest and Sabbath, which I preferred. Never tested the waters again. Are you familiar with them? And if so, can you fill me in on the discography and some history? Thanks. Yes. I highly recommend you go revisit them. So they were basically a German band who had a British singer. The British singer was a guy named John Lawton, who eventually wound up joining Uriah Heep for a bunch of albums in the late 70s. Their albums are all very strong. Great mix of kind of the early stuff is a little bit of proto-metal, hard rock, lots of prog, a little bit of jazz fusion, some blues rock. But every album sounds very different from the one that came before it. So what I would recommend you do, go check out, my favorite is the first album, self-titled Lucifer's Friend. Heavy, heavy proto-metal album. Fantastic. Lawton just screaming to the heavens on that. Such a good album. Great guitar work. Get the Banquet album. The Banquet album is their most prog rock album. It's got bits of jazz fusion in it as well. It's fairly symphonic. That's quite good. Just a Rock and Roll Singer is a great album. Where the Groupies Kill the Blues is a good album. These are all the 70s albums. And then they broke up and they were, long layoff. And then they reunited back a few years back and they put out an album called Too Late to Hate in 2016, which is very strong. Again, with most of the original band and Lawton on vocals. So I definitely check that out. Great band. Thanks for the good question. And the Mind Explosion album is great too. From Bongalon. Okay, Pete, you are now the producer for my all-time travel concert. What is the order of appearance of the following bands? 10cc, Fire Ballet, Gentle Giant, Green Slade, Renaissance, Starcastle, Tranquility. And Gentle Giant better be the headliner or I ain't coming. Okay, I guess you're going to do this to me every week now, Mr. Bongalon. All right, so I would say opening the show is going to be Tranquility. Coming up next is Fire Ballet. After that is Green Slade, then Starcastle, then Renaissance. I mean, honestly, 10cc should be headline that show. But if I was a promoter, I would have 10cc and then Gentle Giant because I agree with you. Gentle Giant, that's who we really want to see. But I mean, as far as like popularity and sales and all that stuff, 10cc should headline that. But I'll give you the Gentle Giant on that one. From Nick's Texans fans #1. Hey Pete, thoughts on Tedeschi Trucks band? Love him, great band. I'm a big Derek Trucks fan. What a great guitar player. I've had the pleasure of seeing him in the Allman Brothers numerous times. He's just fantastic. I love the Derek Trucks band, and I really dig the Tedeschi Trucks band. I like that they kind of do, it's got like this big band thing, kind of like it's kind of rootsy, it's kind of jazzy, it's got bits of soul and R&B, little southern rock, it's a little bit of everything. You got horns and guitars and female vocals and, from his wife, and I dig him. I got to go see him. I heard they're great live. I haven't seen them live yet. But they have a new album coming out soon that I'm really looking forward to. From Big Beagle 88. Hey, Pete, love the show. Thanks for what you do. What are your thoughts on Rory Ackerson's music? I haven't heard a lot of it, but what I've heard, pretty good. Pretty tasty player. Good stuff. He's been around for a while. From Thomas Humphrey. Pete, does your mom like Purple or Sabbath more? I got a lot of mom questions after that last episode. Mom likes Mom likes Purple more because Sabbath has always scared her. Sorry, the crosses and the black and war pigs and all that kind of stuff. And you know what it is? I think she was forever turned off from Sabbath the day I came home from the Born Again show wearing a T-shirt with a baby devil on the front. That was it. She was convinced that Black Sabbath were up to no good from that point. Granted, she never loved Purple either, but I'm sure she'd approve of me listening to them more than Sabbath. From Luis Carrillo. Great show, Pete. Watch it all the time. Question, have you ever been to a concert where that concert was filmed or recorded and was subsequently released by the band as an official live album or DVD? Yes, I have. So the Heaven and Hell live at Radio City Music Hall live album and DVD, I was there. Fantastic evening. Dream Theater Score, okay, their live album. I think it's a triple live album. That was like the Octavarian tour at Radio City Music Hall, also in New York City. I was there that night, so you're hearing me scream on that. Also, I went to the first, I think, 7 or 8 Nearfests, which is a progressive rock festival that was held in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania for a number of years, the late 90s through to, when was the last one? Like a few years back, I don't remember. And I went to the first bunch of them religiously every year. And, they would have this whole weekend full, it's a festival, a whole weekend full of bands. And numerous bands' performances were recorded and released as live albums. And I was in the audience for a good chunk of them. From Pittsburgh Rocks, top 5 Lee Kearslake drum parts from Heap or Ozzy. All right, let's go. Free and Easy by Uriah Heep. Over the Mountain by Ozzy. Look at Yourself by Uriah Heep. Tears in My Eyes by Uriah Heep. And Diary of a Madman by Ozzy. Boom. From Lawrence Terwilliger. Hey, Pete, do you own any greatest hits or best of CDs? I have over 300 of them. Wow, good for you. Found box sets or groups on Amazon that are cheap. I'm going that route instead. The best and greatest hits on one disc are disappointing to me. What do you think? I mean, I have a lot also, and I've had a lot over the years. My problem is with some of them is, and now let's talk greatest hits versus box sets. So a lot of the greatest hits sets, especially the single collections, that's only going to contain, most of the, or some of the radio hits that everybody knows. And I always thought the better route to go, if you're going to go that route, is to get like those, the anthologies or the definitive collections where it's usually 2 discs and you get a good, a much better, obviously, cross selection of songs. My problem with a lot of these things is that I'll go and I'll buy one of them, a hit set or an anthology, thinking, yeah, I just want to have the, the songs that I remember and all that kind of stuff. And then you start listening to it. And then, they always throw a couple tracks on there that weren't hits, and you're like, oh, that's pretty good. Then I wound up going onto like YouTube and start listening to some of the albums in full, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of other great stuff other than what's on there. And I wound up ditching the damn greatest hits CD and going buying the whole discography by the band. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. So I tend to not do that too much anymore. And so in recent years, I've gotten rid of a lot of greatest hits sets that I've had because over the years, I went out and bought the whole catalog from bands. Now, as far as those box sets goes, those were really big in like the 90s. And some of them are pretty complete with having most everything you want by some bands. The only thing with them is that all the boxes are different sizes and, so I got a whole closet full of those things. I mean, you can't fit them anywhere, right? So I have kind of soured on some of that stuff, but I totally understand why people gravitate towards them because it's like, rather than going out and buying 10, 15 CDs by a band or albums, let me just get this box set. It's probably got, 70% of everything I would ever need. Some of us are completists, though, so that's not good enough. So I tend to be a completist about a lot of things. So what are you going to do? From David Koch. Hey, Pete, when are we going to see you play guitar? I don't know, man. Don't know. Actually, I believe if you go into our tributes playlist, I did play guitar very briefly at the intro of my tribute to Malcolm Young when he passed away. That's probably the only time you've seen me with a guitar and playing a guitar. I did it very briefly. Yeah, you might someday. We'll see. Second question. What's your mom's favorite Hawkwind album? Just kidding. She seems very sweet. I miss her. I wish her many years of health and happiness. So do I. Got to keep them around as long as possible. Honestly, I'm sure my mother has probably never heard of Hawkwind before, but if she did, she'd probably gravitate towards Warrior on the Edge of Time. Just my guess. From Indie Cult 777. Hi, Pete. What musician, if any, do you think did a good acting job in films? I think Roger Daltrey in later years has done well. He has. Any other specific movies with musicians you would recommend? There's been a few of them over the years. I thought we're going back a ways for some of these, but Mick Jagger in that performance film, I thought it was very good, and I'm really surprised he didn't do a lot more after that. Especially considering that the Stones have had such long bouts of inactivity. I thought Jagger would have gotten more into acting, but he really hasn't. Courtney Love was great in The People versus Larry Flint. That's something more recent. Again, someone who I thought would have just really embraced acting. And I know she's done a couple other things here and there, but I thought after that she would just be everywhere, and she really wasn't. David Bowie, even though he was probably coked up beyond belief during the whole thing, I thought was really good in The Man Who Fell to Earth. And in recent years, you've seen like Lenny Kravitz and Henry Rollins and Meatloaf showing up in all sorts of TV shows and miniseries and films and stuff like that. And they're doing really well for themselves doing that. And, so I'm sure you're going to see more. From Icaro Borges. Hey, Pete, how familiar are you with the Brazilian prog metal scene? There are a lot of creative stuff going on here in Brazil. The one band that I think deserves the spotlight is Jack the Joker. If you have not heard of them, I strongly suggest their latest album, Mars Volta, especially the epic closing track, Venus and Mars. It will be worth your time. I will go check them out. I got to say, I'm not a huge fan of the Brazilian prog metal scene. Not that a fan, I'm not following. I'm sure there's probably a few bands that I've actually listened to who are from Brazil. And for whatever reason, they're not jumping out at me right now. But I know that there's a big metal scene in general going on down in Brazil and South America in general. But I will go check out Jack the Joker. From Vladimir of St. Petersburg, do you have any albums from Black Oak, Arkansas? Have you not watched the last couple shows? I've been asked this question like 3 times already. I have the live album from the 70s, which I like quite a bit. I don't actually have any of their studio albums, but that's a great live album. It's got a lot of their best tunes on it. And also, do you prefer Steppenwolf or the James Gang? Well, I love Steppenwolf, but I really love the James Gang. In fact, I'm going to be doing a James Gang top 10 songs coming up over the next couple weeks with a special guest. So that's coming. But I love Steppenwolf too. From Bob Goodwin, great show. I have been getting into the band Brand X lately. What is your favorite album from them and why? I think Moroccan Roll, although I love Unorthodox Behavior a lot too, but I think Moroccan Roll, it's just got a nice mix of like kind of jazz and rock, a little bit of Middle Eastern tones and vibes and things. And, John Goodsall, man, whew, he just smokes on that. But all those early Brand X albums are great. What a great fusion band. From James Ferrante, I've seen some of my favorite vinyls finally transferred to CDs, such as John Butcher Axis. It only took 30 years. Others that haven't include The Rings, DVC, and Blanket of Secrecy. What are your favorite vinyl albums that still need CD transfers? Jesus, I don't know. God, I think almost everything that I ever wanted to see is available on CD. I really can't think of anything, to be honest with you. I'll have to give that some extra thought. From Jet Powers, great show as always. My question is, who would you like to see play Keith Moon in a biopic? Rock on, brother. Thank you. I think he'd probably have to lose a little weight for it. Although his current, what he looks like now would be great for the latter period. But I think Jack Black would make a really cool Keith Moon. Right? Or maybe Colin Farrell. I don't know. You need kind of like a bad guy, right? Bad boy. But I would love to see a Keith Moon biopic, man. That would be tragic. From Charles Haynes, hey Pete, I'm an old 70s rocker that recently discovered the band Ghost. It's been 20 years since I discovered a band that I can't get enough of. What's your take on Ghost? I like Ghost. I've been following them since they first burst on the scene. They've been kind of refining their sound a little bit. I thought that their initial kind of image or gimmick was kind of cool, kind of different. And I remember at first I was kind of like, they're all gimmick. The music doesn't back it up. And then I really started to pay real attention. And those first couple albums are really damn good. I think they're going down a road, and obviously they're getting pretty big now. That EP they put out recently, pretty good. The album, Meliora is fantastic. It's the one before it. It looks like they're trying to get really, really commercial. And I wonder if their success is kind of getting to their head a little bit, or to Tobias's head, I should say, or Papa Emeritus, or whatever the fuck he wants to call himself these days. But I sometimes wonder they're taking themselves a little too seriously, going too far down the gimmick route. The music is still good. I mean, they can write catchy hooks, man, and stuff. And I'm in a kind of like a wait and see pattern with them. For me, they kind of seem like they may be at a point where the direction they go is going to be a turnoff for some people who've been following them for a while, including myself. But I'm going to wait and see, because I've liked everything they've done so far. That last EP they put out had a couple of really strong tracks. The rest of it was just not very good, in my opinion, considering the full-length album they did before was so fantastic top to bottom. So we'll see where they go. But yeah, a lot of people jumping on the Ghost bandwagon, and that's good. From Bill Goodwin, hey Pete, Mets win over under 87 wins? Question mark. Yeah, I'm a big Met fan, obviously. Shit, I'm hoping for 90, but I don't know if that's hoping for a little too much. As always, if they can stay healthy, we'll see if these new guys they brought in do well. The pitching's got to stay healthy, and the pitching's guy. I think they should sign Gio Gonzalez. I really do. I think they'll be okay from an offensive standpoint if everybody stays healthy. Because you just imagine if we have like good healthy years from Conforto and from McNeil and from if Alonso does well, and how about Nimmo? I mean, if that all clicks, that's a really good young team, complemented by Cano and the other veterans that they have. So we'll see. We'll see. From H Metal Justin, have you heard the band Ashbury? I just discovered them in their 1983 album. Endless Skies is really good. I've also just discovered. Oh, okay. So yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I also have just discovered them like over the last month or so. Their debut from 83, Endless Skies, is fantastic. I would say if you love Wishbone Ash, classic Wishbone Ash from the 70s, as well as a little bit of like Southern rock, like the Allman Brothers or the Outlaws, especially like the long guitar exploration tunes, a little bit of Jethro Tull, maybe a tiny bit of Sabbath, maybe a little bit of Thin Lizzy. That's what you get with these guys. And they released an album last year, their first album in quite a long time, called The Eye of the Stygian Witches, which is awesome. If you like that early album, Endless Skies, get the new album too. I highly recommend Ashbury to any of you guys. Got 2 lead guitar players. The singer also plays guitar and electric and acoustic guitar. Really, really good band. Really good band. They're from Tucson, Arizona. Check them out. From Lisa T. How many times have you seen Jethro Tull in concert? Speaking of Jethro Tull, how many times have you seen Jethro Tull in concert? And if you've seen them more than once, which time was your favorite? I think I've seen Tull 4 times, but it could be 5. I'd have to go look back. I think the best performance I ever saw by them was at the Beacon Theater in New York City on the Roots to Branches tour, which I think was 1995. But, and again, that was with Martin Barr in the band and Andy Giddings on keyboards and David Pegg on bass, and I'm forgetting the red-haired guy on drums. I'm forgetting his name. Anyway, which is a really good lineup of the band, and they were great that night. But I've seen them numerous other times. I also saw them at Jones Beach in Long Island, outdoor venue in the late 90s, probably 98, 99, which was also really, really good. But I've seen them numerous times. I think I've seen them 4 times. It could be 5 though. But yeah, and that's when Ian still was singing pretty decently. Okay. From Gene Kirsten. Great show, Pete. Were you lucky enough to see the New Barbarians in 77, 78? Best concert I've ever attended. Thanks. No, I did not. Sorry. Never saw the New Barbarians. And last question from David M. Have you ever heard of the fusion band Gamelan? Great fusion band from Buffalo, New York that I don't know why they did not make it big. Yeah, I have, I think their first 2 albums on, or definitely the first one. Do I have more than one? I don't know. Yeah, they were really good. That first one especially was great. I only heard about them because a good buddy of mine was living up in Buffalo for a while, and then when he and I became friends, like in the late 90s, he's like, oh, have you ever heard this fusion band Gamelan? Because I was telling him, yeah, I'm into Return to Forever and Mojave Beast Orchestra, Weather Report, yada, yada, yada. He's like, you got to check out Gamelan. They're really, really good stuff. Another part of David's question, have you heard of the Carl Filipiak group? If you like Hendrix and Beatles influenced jazz fusion, you will probably like Carl Filipiak. I have never. I will go investigate. Okay. That's our last one for today. So you know the drill, guys. If you have questions, put them in the comments and feedback of this video, and I'll tackle them next week. Remember, try and keep it to a max of 2. Some of you guys are stretching it here, and it's like, we're trying to keep these videos under an hour if we can, and we never seem to, but leave time for everybody else. If you're not hearing your answers to some of the questions, that means that they've already been asked and answered in previous episodes. So I'm starting to see a lot of repeats on the questions, which means you guys either aren't watching the previous episodes or you're not paying attention. So you got to do that. So till next time, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're here on the mighty YouTube often as possible. Thanks for all your positive feedback on yesterday's Top 10 Steely Dan songs. That was a blast to do, and got a lot of positive feedback from that and a lot of views. So I guess you guys are digging that. It's fun when we have guest stars on here, right? So we'll see you real soon. We got I'm going to work on a Whitesnake top 10 songs this week, as well as a couple others. I have a new product show that I'm probably going to try and do tomorrow. I got a stack of stuff. We're going to talk about the new Evergrey and Rival Sons and Inglorious and what else is here? Focus and Flotsam and Jetsam and Jesus, all sorts of stuff. Stefan Thelen, we got old Moon June record stuff, all sorts of things. So that'll probably be tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. Till then, I'll see you.